everybody. Welcome back to Can I Have a Word, the podcast that explores language and its impact on our identity and the people we become. I am your host, Carl James, and it's a really nice day here in New York, so I thought, why not do a solo episode? So here we are. Today's episode is going to be an exploration of what it feels like when the foundation that you've built your life on starts to come apart or feels like it's coming apart, when your sense of control slips, when the sense of your identity starts to fracture and the plans that you imagined no longer make sense or aren't even possible. And so today's word is unraveling. Now, unraveling can be simply defined as something being disentangled, or it could be undoing. Think of like thread or something like that. It can also refer to solving or resolving something complicated, like a mystery. But when a person is unraveling or feels like they're unraveling, they're experiencing a sort of mental breakdown that causes them to maybe lack emotional control or a sense of mental coherence, and it really impacts your ability to function. You think of yourself almost like kind of spiraling in a not good direction, obviously. And that can lead to feelings of being overwhelmed, confused, or quite simply out of control. And trust me when I tell you, it's much more than having a bad day or even a bad week. And if you've experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. It's literally the feeling of coming undone without having any sense of how to stop it, fix it, or even slow it down, no matter how much you want to. And so another way to think of it is thinking about it like you're losing the ground beneath you. And that happened to me, I would say, a little over a year ago. A few times on this podcast, I've mentioned that I've been going through a job transition. And I haven't really talked much about the specifics of it because it's, somewhat fresh and it's still ongoing. But what I can say is that several months ago, I separated from my company, and it wasn't necessarily on my terms, let's say. A lot of people experience, job separation, job loss, and, you usually have some sort of time frame to look for another job. And, sometimes it takes a couple months, sometimes it could take a little longer. And, you know, I was in that same position. It took me a very, very, very long time to find another opportunity. And it was a thing of like leaving a company is not necessarily a big deal, or it doesn't have to be. But I think the thing that we don't necessarily appreciate is that what you do for work, while it doesn't necessarily define your life, or it shouldn't define your life, it is a significant part of your identity. You think about going into an office or place of business, or if you work from home, a thing that you spend a lot of hours doing becomes a significant part of who you are. And so if you lose that, that is a sort of part of your identity that is now absent or incomplete or missing. And I had spent a lot of time methodically and carefully sort of crafting my career to the point where I got it. And so when that was no longer a part of me, I didn't feel solid, I didn't feel comfortable, and I didn't really feel complete. I felt like I was sort of a shell of my former self. And I don't even mean that in a hyperbolic way. I just sort of felt kind of empty a little bit. It's like, what's my purpose now? And I tried all the things that they tell you you're supposed to do when you go through job loss. I reformatted my resume. I created multiple versions of my existing resume. I tried to network with people, but to be clear, you can't network with people who don't network back. So I would reach out to people that I knew when I was at my company who did not respond. I tried to reach out to new people, sent, emails just because I thought, this company looked interesting and I thought I could lend my services to whatever they were doing. Like I sort of cast a really wide net. I even worked with a career coach. We did the whole rebranding thing. I did all the things that you're supposed to do, and none of it really seemed to work. I will say the rebranding and all of that was helpful, and I'm glad I went through that, but it didn't get me a job. And so I was like, well, how valuable was that? And so the difficulty of finding my next job opportunity, despite the effort that I was putting in and the experience that I brought to the table, really started to weigh me down. It made me not feel great about everything that I had done up until that point. And it made me start asking really tough questions to myself, like, who am I without my title? How much of my worth was tied to being part of that world, that professional world that I had created and spent so much time in? And what does my value look like when no one else is naming it for me? And I want you to think honestly about, for yourself, who would you be if you didn't have your job title as an identifier? What would you call yourself? Yes, you'd still be, a husband, a wife, a brother, sister, caretaker. You would still have those familial roles, but what else? So much of our actual identity is wrapped up in what we do because hopefully, if you're doing something that you love or at least like, yes, you're trying to earn a paycheck, but hopefully it gives you some degree of fulfillment. And so when that fulfillment is sort of taken from you or is no longer present, that's a part of you that is gone. And so that was tough dealing with all of that. Now, while all of that was happening, I decided that while I had this period of time off, that, there was this medical procedure that I had been thinking about possibly doing. It was elective, so I didn't have to do it, but I decided I had an extended period of time off. Let's go ahead and do this procedure. And so I did it and I got through it successfully. However, there were some unexpected complications that took hold during the recovery period. And I was in an immense amount of pain that was unpredictable from day to day. Like some days I'd be like, okay, and other days I could really not handle it. And there were times where I couldn't even sleep, even with sleep medication. And I was also trying to navigate, figuring out what am I going to do as far as work is concerned. I need to somehow solve that problem while I'm still sitting here writhing around in pain and not being able to essentially be comfortable. Um, and so the solitude that came with that, managing my own recovery basically by myself, was also a part of this kind of unraveling because I just felt very destabilized and nothing I could do seemed to allow me to feel any sort of control. I was like at the mercy of however my body felt that day. In addition to the fact that, you know, I was sending out emails that weren't getting responses. I was trying all these things that just weren't really working. And it made me ask even more questions like, what happens when your body interrupts your plans? Like, you think of yourself as being decently, if you're, decently young, relatively healthy, I went in for an elective procedure, thought shouldn't be that big a deal. Next thing you know, like I can't really do much and I have to just sort of wait this out. And so I was struggling, but I was also kind of struggling alone because I didn't feel comfortable telling people that I wasn't okay because I wasn't okay physically. I wasn't okay emotionally. I wasn't okay professionally. Like it was all just not going well. And so, how do you forgive yourself when you need time to heal and the world keeps moving? How do you take that time and not feel guilty? I knew I had to take the time because I had no other choice, but I'm also starting to panic because if I'm not sending emails or if I'm not creating new resumes or, sending things out, nothing's happening. And so all of these thoughts are rolling around in my head and, you know, from pain to being unemployed to what do I do next? And so things got kind of dark. Your mind goes to some really not great places when you're kind of in this sort of downward spiral. And, you say some unkind things to yourself. There was tears, there was yelling, there was all of those things. Um, Now, I will say, before anyone worries too much, I didn't go to the point of, I would say any sort of like actual breakdown. There was no suicide ideation or anything like that. But I will tell you the thing that I have a greater appreciation for now is I, for the first time while I was going through this, I understood how people get to a place where those thoughts, those really dark thoughts, start to make sense. When it feels like you are not in control and can't get control no matter how much you try, I understand why people go to some really, scary places. And, I'm a very resilient person. I think I've hopefully conveyed that over the course of the episodes that I've been, sharing different parts of my life. And, I usually try to find a way to maneuver in and out of things all the time, and I'm able to problem solve. And this was just one of those things where I could not figure out what to do first, what made the most sense, what was going to move me in the right direction. And it was really a time where I just had to sit with all of the pieces wherever they were. Um, and it wasn't cute. And I wasn't really equipped for how to handle all of those things kind of at the same time where your body isn't working, you're lacking a sort of professional purpose, and emotionally you're just kind of a mess. And so for anyone who's going through their own sort of unraveling, whether that's job loss, health issues, maybe the passing of a loved one, or divorce, whatever it may be, the first thing you really have to do, in my opinion, is that you just have to accept what's happening. As painful, embarrassing, or gut wrenching as it may be, being able to sit in what's happening is not an easy or comfortable thing to do, but it's necessary because I think for a long time I sort of denied that things were as bad as they were. And so because I was doing that, I kind of lived in this place of like, oh, I've already figured it out when I had nothing figured out. And so when things weren't working, I could no longer believe my own BS, if that made sense. So the thing we always want to say is when you're going through, shit, basically, you're like, why me? What did I do to deserve this? And that's an easy place to go. The thing I would say is it's really important to not think of life as this sort of series of, rewards and punishments. Like, if I do good things, I'll be rewarded. If I do bad things, I'll be punished. We've seen enough in the world to know that that's not how it works. It's not an easy equation that makes sense that way. Like sometimes you do good things or you're doing the best that you can, and sometimes shitty things will happen. And instead of thinking that you're being punished, that is just what life is and does sometimes. It sucks, but that was something that I had to just sort of embrace. Um, and so, how did I turn the corner? Um, well, I'll say thank God for therapy, which I talk about all the time, and that's why I had someone that I could reach out to who I could share my sort of inner dark thoughts out loud without feeling judged, without feeling like there was something wrong with me. And so if you don't have a therapist, if you have a trusted friend, a confidant, spouse, whoever it is, someone that you trust that you feel like you can unload on without, let's say, overburdening or, expecting them to fix it, I think that is helpful because I think getting out of your own head is a really important thing to do when you're kind of in one of these kind of spiral situations. Um, and as I started to let some of the really bad thoughts out, we could slowly focus on the rebuild. Like day by day, what can you do? What can you handle today? And we came up with a really practical, but like small, I won't say easy, but approachable way of just kind of thinking through like what I could accomplish in a day, in a week, depending on how much pain I was experiencing. And so that was really helpful. And then I'd say on the professional side, we're still sort of trying to figure out what that is or what that looks like. I mean, certainly, this podcast is very much a part of that. Um, this has been an unexpected kind of blessing in terms of me finding a space where I could talk about these types of things that, quite frankly, I would never have talked about before, and sharing in a more honest way because I hope that it can be helpful for other people. Um, and so where this goes, obviously, I have no idea. Um, Maybe there'll be a book, maybe there will be other things. I don't know, but I'm still very much writing the story as it's being told, as far as like my career and what it looks like. And so the one thing I can say, despite not having a crystal ball and being able to predict where I'm going to end up, I can say that this is the most authentically me that I've ever been, full stop. And so maybe, just maybe, all of the BS that I went through was necessary for me to get here. Um, I wish it wasn't, but here we are. And so, again, it's really important to notice in your own life if you start having this sense of like things are out of control and you feel like no matter what you try to do, you can't quite get stabilized. Some of us who have perfectionist type qualities or type A qualities or grew up thinking that we were the greatest thing that ever came to be don't necessarily handle it well when the ground shifts and things kind of fall apart and you have to sort of rebuild yourself. And, yes, it takes a lot of resilience. Yes, it takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of humility and honesty as well. And that's not easy to do. And so give yourself the grace to do that. Lean on people if you can. Trust that people will be there, can be there for you, and want to be there for you. And then the last thing I'll say, sometimes this idea of unraveling and coming undone doesn't actually break you, even though it damn sure feels like it's trying to. It could actually free you up. And yes, that can be terrifying, but sometimes that freedom is exactly what you need to realize what you're supposed to be or realize what you're supposed to be doing. And so, even when the threads may come undone, if you will, it's up to you to choose how to put yourself back together. What you weave next is up to you. And so, I'm weaving together my next chapter, and we're going to see where this takes me day by day. And so, I hope that at least me sharing my story of my own sort of unraveling brings something, maybe hope to whatever you might be going through and maybe a way forward. Um, and so, yeah, it's never easy to admit when you're in those really dark places, but trust that there is really a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes you got to make a lot of turns and you fall down and all the things, but the light is there if you really look for it. So, um, leaving on a hopeful note, hopefully that resonates with you. And yeah, um, thank you for listening. Thank you for going on that journey with me. And I will see you on the next episode of Can I Have a Word? Bye, everybody.